The man behind the curtain. When people think of Michael Jackson, they often picture the moonwalk, the sequined glove, the dazzling lights of his concerts, and the screams of fans who would faint at just the sound of his voice. But behind that carefully crafted public persona was a man whose relationship with music was almost spiritual. Michael Jackson did not simply make songs, he channeled them. Stay in the spotlight. Hit like and subscribe for more untold celebrity stories. What the world rarely saw, however, was the private world in which this channeling happened, the recording studio. For Michael, the studio wasn't just a workplace, it was a sanctuary, a laboratory, and, in many ways, a church. It was within those four padded walls that his most guarded ritual unfolded, a ritual that few producers, engineers, or collaborators ever forgot. This is the untold story of Michael Jackson's secret studio habit, the ritual that fueled his genius, and the intimate practices that transformed raw sound into history-making music. To Michael, stepping into the studio was akin to entering sacred ground. He would often insist on dimmed lights, a specific scent in the air, and absolute silence before work began. Those around him described it as though he were preparing for a ceremony, not a recording session. Brad Sundberg, one of his longtime studio engineers, once recalled that Michael would remove his shoes before stepping onto the main studio floor. It was as if he were grounding himself, connecting to the earth, despite being surrounded by technology. He treated the studio with reverence, Sundberg explained. It was not a place to play around. It was where the magic happened. And before the first note was played, Michael would close his eyes, bow his head slightly, and take a deep breath. To some, it looked like meditation. To others, it was prayer. This was the beginning of his secret habit. Perhaps the most famous part of Michael's creative process was his obsession with capturing ideas immediately. He was rarely without a small tape recorder, even in hotel rooms, limousines, or late-night walks. But in the studio, this habit became ritualized. Before musicians ever entered, before producers began layering beats, Michael would step into the vocal booth alone. He would carry with him a handheld recorder, and instead of singing full lyrics, he'd hum, grunt, beatbox, and mumble melodies into it. Quincy Jones, who produced Thriller and Bad, once said, "Michael doesn't write music in the conventional way. He sings it into a tape recorder, every part. The bass line, the strings, the rhythm, the melody. Then he brings it to us, and we have to translate it." This wasn't casual humming. Michael would perform entire arrangements vocally, beatboxing the drumline, mimicking brass sections, layering falsetto harmonies. It sounded chaotic, but when transcribed, it revealed a complete musical architecture. This ritual ensured that no inspiration slipped away. Michael believed music was a divine gift, and if he didn't capture it immediately, it might vanish forever. Once the skeleton of a track was laid down, Michael's next ritual kicked in: movement. For Michael, music was inseparable from dance. And in the studio, he treated playback sessions as live performances. Engineers often described how he would blast a rough mix through the speakers, then lose himself completely, spinning, sliding, stomping across the floor, sweat pouring down his face. Bruce Swedian, his legendary recording engineer, recalled, "He would dance in the control room, in the booth, everywhere. You'd think it was a concert with thousands of fans, but it was just us watching." Why this ritual? Michael believed his body was an instrument. If he couldn't physically move to a track, if it didn't make him feel, then the song wasn't ready. Dance was his ultimate test. Michael was notorious for working deep into the night. But few people knew why. He believed that nighttime was when the world grew still enough to let inspiration breathe. He loved recording after midnight, recalled Teddy Riley, who worked with him on Dangerous. He said the silence outside made the music inside louder. His ritual was strict. The later it got, the more focused he became. He would dim the lights almost completely, sometimes asking for candles to be lit, creating a near-mystical atmosphere. Those who joined him often felt as though they were in a sacred ceremony, not a recording session. Michael's studio rituals weren't only about atmosphere. They were also about authenticity. He had one unusual test. He wanted to know if a child would feel the magic. Often, he'd invite kids, sometimes family, sometimes children of friends, into the studio. He would play them an unfinished track and carefully observe their reactions. "If the kids start moving, I know it's right," Michael once said. "If they don't feel it, then the song isn't finished yet." This ritual revealed his obsession with universality. Michael didn't want music that only impressed producers or critics. He wanted music that moved the soul, regardless of age, language, or culture. Another little-known ritual was how Michael treated his vocal recordings. He didn't simply step into the booth and sing. He often whispered to the microphone first, almost as though speaking to it. "Okay, let's make magic," he would murmur. Or, "Give me your best tonight." To outsiders, it seemed strange. But to Michael, the microphone was a vessel, a bridge between his spirit and the listener's heart. Treating it as alive, as sacred, helped him deliver those spine-tingling takes that became his trademark. Perhaps the most mysterious part of Michael's studio ritual was the final playback. When a song was nearly complete, he would ask everyone to leave. The control room emptied, and Michael would sit alone in the dark with the speakers. 4 hours, he would play the song on loop, eyes closed, sometimes rocking back and forth, sometimes crying. He wasn't just listening for mistakes. He was feeling. Did the song touch him? Did it still move him after the 100th listen? If the answer was no, the track would be reworked. It was during these lonely hours that many of his classics were finalized. Michael's studio rituals weren't quirks. They were the scaffolding of his genius. By treating the studio as sacred, by recording melodies instantly, by dancing with the music, by testing it with children, and by listening alone in the dark, he crafted songs that transcended generations. Tracks like Billie Jean, Beat It, Earth Song, Remember the Time, and Man in the Mirror weren't accidents. They were the result of discipline, ritual, and a near-mystical relationship with sound. Even decades later, producers and musicians who worked with him still struggle to explain it. They often use the same words: magical, spiritual, otherworldly. But perhaps Michael himself said it best. "I don't write my songs. I just step into the studio and let God give them to me." Michael Jackson's secret studio habit wasn't just one thing, it was a constellation of rituals. Together, they formed a process that was as much spiritual as it was technical. For Michael, music wasn't manufactured. It was channeled. And the studio was his sacred temple where that channeling took place. This is the truth behind his genius. Not just talent, not just hard work, but an unshakable belief that music was divine, and that his rituals were the key to unlocking it. Thanks for watching.